this is an interesting day because I've decided to take this webinar, maybe foolishly, we'll see by the end of it, on my boat. So I'm on the boat taking this call, and we're trying to get five bars as soon as we can, but we have some fun stuff planned. We want this webinar to be interactive. And so this is going to be actually participant-led for the most part. We've had some planted questions that we've asked our audience, but also we want to make sure we open up the lines of communication to get other people chiming in and maybe even bringing some of those questions on stage. So why don't I share my screen and then we'll dive in. Let me do that. If everyone can see my screen right now. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so today we're joined by a great partner who's been in the space for a really long time, Riverbend Consulting. We've got both partners on the line. We've got Joe and Lesley. So I'm excited to have them joining. This is a repeat webinar, not in terms of content, but in terms of the fact that we're just great partners in the space. So I'm going to do a quick intro myself, and then I'll kick it over to Joe and Lesley. Chad Rubin, I've been in the space for 20 years. My sole focus is really leaving the space better than how I found it. And started Stubana. We sold in 21, and the Prosper Show I co-founded with a few other people. We sold that in 2019, and now I've started a private label repricer called Profasee. Our focus is to maximize profit or BSR or velocity through price changes. And we use machine learning and deep learning to do that. I'm going to kick it over to you and to Joe and Lesley for your intro.
Sure, Lesley, go ahead.
So my name is Lesley Hensell. Joe and I co-founded Riverbend Consulting 6.5 years ago. And I have been an Amazon seller since 2010, but have been helping sellers with problems for about a decade now. Most of those problems being things like account suspensions, ASIN suspensions, and really anytime you have a problem with Amazon that doesn't make sense, or Amazon will not communicate with you, or they do that fun thing we all love where they ask the same question over and over and over. So that's really my specialized side of the house. But now Joe's going to tell you about himself because he's really the power seller in our duo.
Thanks, Lesley. Well, Lesley's right. We started this company about 6.5 years ago, and I always love telling everyone how we met. Basically, I was a seller. At the time, I was selling beauty products, and I got suspended for inauthentic, which if any of you have been selling on Amazon, you know, you're familiar with that term. And was trying to get it solved for months, actually. Was losing sleep over it, found myself spending all my time on that side as opposed to growing my business, finding new products, new relationships. And then I met Lesley, and she got it solved in 2 days. And then we realized that we probably had a business there. So like Lesley said, we started about 6.5 years ago. I've still been selling throughout the entirety of Riverbend's existence. I've gone on to selling global brands, getting exclusives with certain brands. I deal a lot with brand registry and exclusive products and UPCs. This podcast and kind of what Chad does is super important to me, and it hits home because I deal with this on a daily basis also. Pricing products, competing with global brands, competing with private label sellers and everyone in between. So I think this is a super important topic for everyone who really wants to win in 2024. So that's my background.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So I think, why don't we get started just with a quick, because we want this to be as interactive as possible. We're going to get started with a quick question, which is, we're going to play The Price is Right. So what is the price of this stainless steel garlic press? No peeking on Amazon specifically. $14.97, $11.65, $12.25, or $17.95. If everyone wants to just go ahead and vote. Get people used to putting in some information to the system, getting comfortable with the fact that this is an interactive webinar, not just us talking at you, but talking with you as a dialogue. Make sure we get those in. Get your final answers going. So where'd everyone vote? Okay, where did we land? All right. So it
Nice.
looks like there's a nice, interesting distribution, right? 1497, 1165, 1225, or 1795. This is the distribution that we have on this call. And now, if we can get a drum roll, please. Okay, what is the right answer here?
The correct answer for this one is actually letter D, 17.95.
1795. So it's pretty crazy, right? That pricing specifically is in the eye of the beholder, right? And everyone relates pricing back to their experience with maybe the word stainless steel, or maybe the fact that there's black on it, or the last time they bought a garlic press, or the last time they used a garlic press in their kitchen. So everyone has their own frame of reference. And I think this points to home a very important point, is that there's a price to value discrepancy that's happening on the Amazon marketplace. And this is the problem really that Profasee specifically solves, is that private label sellers are crisscross applesauce, and they don't know exactly how they're coming up with pricing. They look online, they find their nearest competitor, and that's how they price their product. And so I want to start off the dialogue around pricing with that in mind. And I'm going to throw the first question that we had from the community out to Joe. And of course, I'd love to interact on this point too. And then of course, if there's questions that come up around pricing, if you're a private label brand and you want to know more about pricing from myself, Joe, or Lesley, like please shout it in the chat. This is free consultation time and consulting time that we typically charge lots of money for, and you're getting it for free today. So feel free to drop those questions in the chat. So the first question goes to Joe.
So the question is what are the key seasons to reprice your products, or do you want me to comment on the garlic press?
I think you can comment on, take it where you want to. I think it's
Okay.
a free for all here.
So I think, I mean, again, in my experience selling both private label products and brands, I think sometimes sellers get too caught up with their margin, right? So they have a price that they buy from their supplier, and then they think, okay, well, the typical markup should be X, instead of more focusing on what the value is to the customer, right? So I'm a big believer in obviously all the softwares that are out there, but also you have to use your brain, and you have to use your customer or your end user cap, and you have to go and search the terms that you feel you belong to, right? And where you feel you land between the top of the page and the bottom of the first page. And sometimes something as slight of a difference as a main image, as the amount of variations you have, as the amount of features you have, how good your content is, how good your reviews are, all of those things could really alter where your price should be. And I think when people start out at a low price and then they're too afraid to increase the price because they don't want to lose velocity, right? Because they might have a lot of inventory bought. It really is holding that seller back from making true profit. Now, we've all seen what happens in fourth quarter, and Amazon is very, very dangerous in this sense, where they raise storage fees to insane numbers. If you have inventory sitting now for more than 6 months, it starts to tag on long-term storage fees. And Amazon is changing fee structures almost every 6 months. Like they sent out a new thing, I think first week of January, that apparel is going to get charged differently, standard is going to be charged differently. So unless you're adapting and you're really maximizing your price while still maintaining a healthy sales rate, right, a velocity, I think you're just not playing the game right. You really don't want to get stuck somewhere just because you feel comfortable there. You really need to be pushing the envelope. And I think softwares like Chad's and others that really do that for you, or at least understand the logic and base it off of other sellers, off of your velocity, off of the competitors, I think that's the wave of the future. So that's my take on this example, plus kind of pricing the right way in certain seasons, right? Because there are definitely seasons to almost every business. There are evergreen products that are good all year round, but even those, like fourth quarter is always better because they could also give it as gifts. There's back to school, there's cold weather, there's beach season. There's all these different things that could attribute to a product getting hot. and selling better. But if you're not maximizing your profits and your pricing, you're making a huge mistake.
Yeah, so I'm gonna double click onto that. For us at Profasee and my own perspective, having my own e-commerce business as private label, is that the days of static pricing your product are over. So most sellers are really their framework is a guesswork. It's actually not even a framework around pricing. They just go, and I think Ryan Lynn wrote this himself in the chat, that he and others, right, just go, they slap a price to whatever is being sold on the marketplace based on competition. So it's a lot of guesswork. And so that to me means that there's a ton of money being left on the table. And so for us specifically at Profasee, we have a model that's been built where we can understand that brands are under monetizing their products on Amazon, and they're not changing their price based on season or based on demand. And so most sellers don't even know if their price is even correct, if they're overpriced or if they're underpriced. Again, they're just copying their competitor's product. And so we believe there's a different way. We believe pricing should never be static. Pricing should be dynamic, the same way Uber Surge has Uber Surge pricing, or the same way Expedia changes their pricing online. And so while I would say there's a lot of gurus out there that talk about pricing that are in the space, it's really easy to talk about, but it's hard to practice, especially on Amazon since it's so messy. And you guys know best how messy Amazon really is. It's super, super duper messy. And so our model learns and evolves and grows up and understands not only psychology of customers buying products, they understand the competitors, because we're scraping in the competitors with our technology, and then we're analyzing that and observing the patterns and the trends, and that is how we're repricing during seasonally strong or seasonally weak times. Anything to add on that, Joe, or Lesley, for that matter?
Well, I'm looking at some of the questions coming in, and it's related to what we're talking about. I just want to address some of them. That it looks like Ryan Lynn wrote in. I currently follow other brands' pricing when it comes to how similar the product is. Is there another way, or I guess tips to follow? I think what we're kind of getting at, Ryan, is that I think there is a way to test the price resistance. So even if your competitors are priced at a certain price point, I think a lot of cases, especially if you're competing with Amazon, meaning Amazon as the seller and they're buying it from 1P, they are not as agile as you as a seller is. So they might be pricing something a certain way. They have buyers that like handle hundreds of vendor accounts, and they're not looking at the business the way you are. So even if they're priced at a certain price, that doesn't mean you have to be there. People understand that Amazon Basics or Amazon Essentials is one thing, but you building a brand and telling your story, I do believe that it commands a higher price. So I'm a fan of like kind of what Chat Software does, is testing that resistance level, kind of pushing it up a little bit. If you don't see a dip in sales or organic rank or your organic rank on certain keywords, then you're in the clear. You kind of got over that hump, and there's nothing wrong with continuing to push it. Now, also, like we were talking about seasonality, if you're using a lot of the softwares like Helium 10 or Jungle Scout and seeing search volume increase going into a season, that's the best time to do it, because you're most likely not going to suffer the decrease in sales because there's increased search volume. So for example, if you're selling 20 or 30 or 40 pieces a day, right, out of season, and then you're going into season and the search volume really picks up, you potentially can maintain the same amount of sales per day, but increasing the price, because now there's much more searches and much more intent to buy. So that's kind of what we're talking about, of playing the seasons to your favor.
Yeah.
I think that's a very savvy way to look at it. But I would say it also ties back to your inventory control and your forecasting, because if you're forecasting to sell double or triple the units and you're selling the same amount, that doesn't help either. So I think, profitability and sales velocity kind of play hand in hand.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about, I just brought up an interesting graph I just wanted to pull up. I think it really speaks to this point of seasonality. And so if everyone looks at this and there's 3 lines on this, right? There's price down below. You've got blue line, which is profit of last year, and you have the red line, which is profit this year. And you see that we're going back to February, and you can chart this line. So this customer is never changing price. So never capitalizing on the price to value discrepancy on the marketplace when there's seasonally stronger periods or seasonally weaker periods in their business. And so they're never changing price. Maybe there's a discount here and there's maybe a discount here, but this discount is just done on a very arbitrary basis. And so what you see with Profasee when we started in May is that we test pricing and explore pricing to learn and train a model. And then the model decides that actually it's a good idea to lower price. Lower price because that increases demand. And you can see that demand starts increasing. You can see the model starts picking up that demand increase. And with that demand increase, it actually starts increasing pricing over time down below. And you can see what happens to this profit at the top. So throughout history, the red and the blue line are highly, highly correlated. But you can see here where they diverge is the fact that Profasee is picking up that there's profit being left on the table. There's money being left on the table. And as we start increasing price here, right, you can see profit increases, and then we're back to the drawing board and go back to the same correlation. And we constantly are repeating this process to exploit what's happening in the marketplace. This is just a real live example I want to share.
Actually, I want to jump in and give another example that happened to one of my products throughout fourth quarter. So in third quarter, I had a product that was listed at $21.99. I was pretty consistent between 21 and 23 for about 2-3 months, right? Third quarter, August, September, and then October hit. I was still around that range. Then, because it has to do slightly with gift giving, it's not a hardcore gift giving item, but it could be seen as gift giving. The category got a ton more search volume, and not only me, but other people in the category started raising their pricing. By the end of December, I was at $32.99, and my BSR didn't change. So obviously BSR, is very important, but my velocity went up because in December you're getting more sales at the same BSR, and my price went up literally by $10. So, and someone just asked, how do you avoid the buy box suppression? If you're increasing it slowly and not kind of making an immediate jump, you're fine, because usually what Amazon does, it'll take into account the last 30 days or 45 days of sales. So if you go from 21 to 23, get a few sales at 23, 2 days later or 3 days later, you go up to 24, and then a few days later to 25 or 26, and you keep getting sales, it's going to take your weighted average. And as long as you're within about 20 to 30%, I don't know the exact number, it might be different by category, but they'll allow you to raise it. So that should be okay. Also, keep in mind, you have to have your list price higher than your current price. Because if you have your list price lower, that sometimes triggers things with Amazon saying, hey, they're higher than their list price. That's a problem. So make sure you have the correct list price by variation, not just the parent.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on. I think there's another question. I think Michael was speaking about the fact that he sells on multiple channels. And this is a pretty hot topic because a lot of times the other channels, depending on their profit, how much profit they drive for you, can actually hold your business hostage. But one thing I want to talk about is that we won't take on a private label brand if there's not unique products across the marketplaces. Meaning, if there is significant channel conflict, there's not a whole lot you can do, right? Unless you actually have unique SKUs and unique UPC codes with varying pack sizes across those channels. The other thing you can do is, as you change pricing on Amazon, you have to update on other platforms, which is another opportunity. But one other thing I noticed in terms of buy box suppression, now Profasee solves for buy box suppression. So we have technology that we built that automatically resets back to the original price, depending on your risk tolerance, by the way. So if you're risk loving, some people actually don't mind losing the buy box. I know Michael said it's detrimental, but some sellers actually like to test Amazon's algorithm. And sometimes when you change your price, assuming you don't have channel conflict, you can change your price, and that specific price point that's on the channel, and let's just say you get suppressed on Amazon, you let it sit there for 2 days, and actually that becomes a new normalized price that Amazon's okay with, and the suppression goes away. So it actually depends. It's very unique to the circumstance and the flexibility of the specific customer that we're working with at Profasee. Now, John Reinhardt says, does pricing strategy change based on the customer's propensity to repeat purchase regularly? So could constant changes turn customers off? And so I don't know, John, if you're referring to subscribe and save. But if you are subscribe and save, we have a guardrail that we put in place, which is a 10% increase, but there's actually more of a propensity to decrease. Now, sometimes increasing pricing isn't always the optimal decision on Amazon. Sometimes it's actually decreasing price. To Joe's point, you decrease price, you increase demand, you have more absolute profit contribution dollars than you do by that of unit velocity versus that decrease. And now suddenly your BSR is also ranking higher, your competitive position is ranking higher. So to your point, I think to John's point specifically is that we haven't seen a change, especially since we have rules that we built in our software around subscribe and save and repeat purchases.
Yeah. So, Chad, I also just want to speak to Wes's question. I think Lesley can also chime in because she deals a lot with the pricing suppression too. Is when our suggestion, again, everyone's business is different. Everyone has their own capabilities, and sometimes their off Amazon business is bigger than their on Amazon business, if they're in wholesale or retail or on other marketplaces. But usually, and it's a little bit harder to do upfront, but it does seem to work the best, is when you have unique UPCs, but also unique offerings. So you can use the same products, but bundling it in a way or having it as a 2-pack, as long as it's a different UPC, most of the time that works. I did see this past season a few cases where Amazon, they must have really good bots because they were scouring other sites for the same title. So title could also be a problem, even if it's a different UPC. I did see that, but a lot less of that. So just being savvy enough to kind of put a different UPC on it and potentially bundling it with something else, or even doing a 2-pack, would definitely help. I know it doesn't work as well with sharing inventory across all channels, but you really do have to kind of treat Amazon differently if you want that business to grow. Because if you're going to keep getting suppressed and losing buy box, that's going to hurt your long-term BSR and your keyword rankings. I mean, there's a lot of evidence showing that if you stay in stock, keep your BSR there, get good reviews, over time, you're going to continually get better listings. So losing it is really not the right strategy either, to kind of cover yourself for other marketplaces. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was a great explanation for Wes. I just want to share, I was on the call today with a diaper manufacturer, and while Huggies, and I forgot the other brand manufacturer, really owns the space, they're the third or fourth incumbent in the space. And what they've done is Amazon actually is counting the unit cost of each diaper and making sure that they're priced appropriately. So they're getting that specific. Amazon's going into that much detail, right? The cost per diaper on a unit basis across channel. And so what this client did was they created a unique pack size that it was not only a unique pack size to make it more difficult for Amazon, but they've added wipes to the pack. So now it's diapers plus wipes. And as a father, right, I can relate to that. But that makes a whole lot of sense. And they increase their AOV at the same time. And it's a unique UPC and it can't be shopped across channel.
Great idea.
All right. So should we move? I know we've covered a lot here, a lot of traction. Any other questions that came in that we may have missed?
I think we covered.
I think we're okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're going to move to slide number 8. Throw this over to Lesley.
Okay, so Amazon is continuing a lot of the same trends that we saw the last half of last year. But what's really interesting, if you sell long enough on Amazon, everything comes back. It's just like bad fashion from the 70s that all of a sudden people are wearing bell bottoms again. It's the same thing. So years and years ago, when Amazon really started ramping up enforcement, they would mostly enforce on inauthentic for account appeals. Well, that has suddenly come back. So for a while, you would just get ASIN appeals for inauthentic, but usually inauthentic wouldn't take your account down if you addressed those ASINs. Now the inauthentic account appeal has definitely come back in mass. So that's something to look out for. Linked accounts is still a big deal. That is where Amazon believes that you are related to an account, that your current account is related to an account that is no longer allowed to sell on the platform because of some past enforcement that you've had on that account. The problem with this is there's lots of false positives. It could be someone that you lived with 10 years ago. It could be an account that you've completely forgotten that you had from back in college. It can be lots of things. So those are really difficult to comply with. And then what's interesting is a lot of times, Amazon does a code freeze in Q4. And during code freeze, they don't change anything. It's exactly what it sounds like. Unless there is an emergency, they do not touch their code. And that includes everything from how the buy box works to how BSR is calculated to how they do enforcement and how they find violations and how they, ask you questions. So in first quarter, all of a sudden, sometimes you see a lot of big changes or even a whole lot of small changes because there were teams working on those during Q4 and they roll them all out in first quarter. We're seeing those right now, and some of them, y'all, they're insane. I usually try and be really calm in how I critique Amazon's changes and say, oh, there's a reason they do this and let me explain. No, some of these are just flat out stupid. And you're going to see them if you have any suspended ASINs or a suspended account. There are some circumstances where they are not asking for a plan of action. Like in the past, they would ask you for a plan of action where you say, here's the root cause, here's how I fixed it, here's what I'll do in the future to not have the same problem happen again. Instead, now they are asking for proof that you didn't do the bad thing, or proof that customer complaints were bad, and here's my messages from those customers showing that they didn't understand the product. I mean, crazy stuff. So I would just encourage folks, if you're getting some of these really crazy requests from Amazon, if you're having to appeal something and it doesn't make any sense, you might have to find a way to write a plan of action anyway and get it to them through another channel, because this new test enforcement thing that they're trying out is not going to work long term. And to anyone who gets panicky about these things, this happens every year. They roll out some new program, they think it's going to be great, it doesn't work, and they go back to the old way. So that's where we are right now in Amazon seller performance.
Amazing. Joe, anything to add to that?
Lesley said it all. Hard for me to add to it. She really, her and her team, I will tell you, are amazing. They probably have at one given time, probably in and out of close to 500 to 600 accounts and their types of issues. So there's just so many different data points that they're collecting and using to help sellers get through these tough times. So not much to add.
Okay, yeah, let's move on here. So pricing as an advantage even against global brands. So I'll start it off. I'll kick things off. I actually just posted an interesting Twitter post specifically about this in a way, and that it's everyone's dream to really want to go multi-channel. And I just told the story on Twitter about this specific brand on Amazon that decided to go multi-channel and go into Target. And they lost control of their pricing. Why? Because Target and Big Box specifically, they actually set up what the map pricing is, and then suddenly now Amazon has to match those map prices. So why is this now? How does this relate to this specific slide? Is that global brands have so much channel conflict, and they have so many other channels that they're selling on. And a lot of times they're selling not on the marketplace, not on the seller side of Amazon, but they're selling on the vendor side, where Amazon is controlling their price. And this actually is a massive, massive opportunity. And if your competition is selling multi-channel, it's actually a massive opportunity because it allows you to actually maintain dominance of top of search on Amazon and for specific keywords that you want, and to use pricing as a lever to maximize that opportunity. It's probably the best and quickest lever you can pull that nobody is pulling. So to me, pricing specifically is like, hey, if you're competing against bloated, traditional, small, or big box retailers, or retailers or brands that sell into big box specifically, then there's a massive, massive opportunity that you can use where you can use pricing to your advantage because they don't have the kind of control and nimbleness and agility that you do as a brand.
So something to add to that, again, I think every category is slightly different, but at least I can speak to my experience in some of the apparel categories that I sell in. A lot of these bigger companies, especially if they're a licensee, so if they're like licensing, a brand in a category, they have certain requirements. One, they have to use certain approved factories, which those approved factories across the globe, so, either in China, Pakistan, India, wherever, most of the time their pricing is a little bit higher, and it has to be because of a lot of different factors. Two, a lot of these bigger companies have to work on higher margins, so obviously big corporations and a lot of overhead. So already you're kind of at even playing ground. If you're a smaller company, if you have a lot of freedom with your pricing, they have certain requirements that they have to hit. So let's say especially in the launch phase, where if you're a small company or a one-man show entrepreneur, you can start out kind of low to gain traction, where they can't do that. Or if they do, they would have to get board approval or CEO approval. No one has time for all that. If you're your own company and you're setting up something and you can really hit the ground running, you immediately have that edge. The only area where I think it's sometimes tough to compete is on the ad spend side. So that's really where I think it's so important to focus on organic ranking, and that's where pricing comes into play. I think on the ad spend side, I've seen global brands really try to dominate, but there is always a way to combat it. There are, especially if you have a better offer or a better price, you could do display ads on their pages. You could target some of their ASINs. There's a lot of ways to do it. So, again, I think there's advantages to both, but there's definitely, like, Amazon's built for private label brands, right? They want the best value for the customer. So there's still opportunity.
And I think one important point I want to mention before we move to the next slide, Joe, is you mentioned about ad spend, and to me, pricing dictates spend. And so there's just a really interesting chart that I want to share with people. This is just something for people to think about, right? The whole idea of this webinar is to have people think differently, or have them see things in a different perspective specifically. And so if we just look at this one chart, I think is so important. Let me zoom out for a second, is that if you change pricing, you change ACoS, meaning your ACoS increases and your price increases, you can double your contribution profit. And so while your ROAS and your ACoS both look worse, right? If you go to a typical seller and say, hey, I'm going to increase your ACoS, people would say, don't you dare. Same thing for ROAS, right? Are you going to decrease my ROAS? Like, so the difference is that those metrics that we track, that Amazon wants you to track, are revenue embedded metrics. They actually don't track the cost of the product or the cost of delivery to the product to get you to the profit on ad spend specifically here. And so I just want to point out that I think it's super important for people on the call to think about their prices and how they change relative to advertising spend. And that's one of the things that we also have been doing at Profasee.
Chad, I want to jump in on this because this is a huge topic. When we're selling and we're pricing things, years ago you were able to get bids under $1 on certain categories, 70 cents, 50 cents. Like, I used to live in that 50 to 70 cents range. Like, that's where the sweet spot was. Most categories that I sell in now are at least $1, especially peak. It could be between $1 and $2 just to get clicks. But if you're selling an inexpensive item, let's say an item under $20, if you really can't base your success of that ad on ACoS, because even if you're getting a ton of sales, a ton of orders, your order value compared to your cost per click, it just doesn't make sense, right? You're not going to be a 10 ACoS. You're not going to have 15% ACoS. But as your price goes up, right, especially during peak season, you'll have the luxury to pay a little bit more and spend more because your retail is higher. So something at $19.99, you may be spending $1.50 a click, but at $29.99, you might be able to spend $1.75 to $2, and you might be able to have a higher budget. So Chad, you're dead on. Like, unless you're playing that pricing game and kind of testing that resistance, you're never going to be able to do that, and then you're going to be kind of eaten up and swallowed up by the guys that have the big ad spend and that are measuring the metrics this way.
Okay, so I'm going to jump 10 to 11. We'll come back get Lesley in the game here. So my brand registry got suspended, but I only filed one report of violation. And the other seller is definitely violating my copyright. What's up with that?
Okay, so this is a really frustrating topic and it's happening a lot more. So when Amazon rolled out Brand Registry 2.0, I think all of us were super excited because we thought this is going to be more features for Amazon sellers. Well, with that comes more enforcement against Amazon sellers. So Brand Registry doesn't want to hear from you. And that is really frustrating because they put tools in place like report a violation and like Project Zero so that you could keep counterfeiters off your listings. You could keep protect your trademark, protect your copyrighted materials. And it is absolutely valid that you file reports against these folks who are violating your rights and protect your ability to sell your product effectively. Unfortunately, we are seeing Amazon clamp down on sellers who are reporting violations, even if the violations are completely valid. I had one client who made 2 complaints in 2 years for copyright violation, where other sellers blatantly ripped off the photos on his listing. He reported them. They reached out to him, apologized, removed the photos, and then he lost his report of violation abilities for abuse. That is absolutely insane. So the first word of warning is don't abuse the system. Most sellers don't, but some do, and some don't even realize what abusing the system means. You cannot say you made a test buy when you didn't make a test buy of a product. You have to actually do the work, order the product, and have the proof that it's different from what the listing is. You cannot report people and say that it's counterfeit goods or inauthentic goods just because they aren't part of your distribution network. If you have channel leakage, that is your problem. That is not those other sellers' problem. And that sounds really harsh, but the reality is you're actually setting yourself up for a lawsuit. If you report people who are selling your valid product, you just don't like how they got it. And we spend a lot of time working with sellers who've been attacked by brands who are angry. We had one just last week where a guy had bought product from a site's from a brand's website and then was flipping it on Amazon, and they literally responded to him, well, this is counterfeit because we're not selling it. No, that's not how counterfeit works. So you have to lessen your risk with Amazon as much as possible by being very diligent and very careful about who you report and why. And if this is someone who it appears they only have 1 or 2 units in stock for some reason, if this is someone who you think they're going to disappear, you might think about not reporting. And I hate saying that. That hurts me. But it's just risky. You need to go after the people who really are causing you damage. And then Chad, do you mind if I cover a couple questions we've had in the chat real quick?
I would love that. That's great.
Awesome. Okay, so John asked, does account health assurance have any value? No. So account health account health assurance is a program Amazon launched when they launched their account health rating. That's the little bar that you see on your seller performance page that shows if you're in the red or the yellow or the green. And they said, if you meet certain criteria, you're automatically enrolled in account health assurance, and we're not going to suspend your account, and we're going to reach out to you and work with you. The reason it has no value is, number one, they're actually reaching out and working with almost anyone that has an account health rating violation where they've fallen into the yellow or the red. You're not really getting any special treatment because you're in the assurance program. They really are trying to work with all sellers on this. But then number two, if you're doing anything that they actually consider risky for the platform, like if they think you could be selling counterfeit, if you violate Section 3, which is code of conduct, anything like that, they're just going to suspend now and ask questions later, or they're going to put you into review. The account health assurance doesn't seem to make a difference as far as I can tell. I think it was one more of Dharmesh Mehta's really feel-good programs that doesn't really mean anything, sadly. And then I had a question from Leon. What other channel would you recommend to reappeal if an appeal for account deactivation for inauthentic is rejected by seller performance twice? So first thing I want you to do, Leon, is back up for a second and really make sure your appeal is dead on. You do not want to start escalating to other channels at Amazon until you are confident you have nailed it. You fully understand what the problems were with the merchandise or in your account. Or if you really think there weren't problems, find something to cop to. Find something you can tell them you're going to do better. You've really got to make sure that you have nailed it on that. Have someone else read your appeal. Make sure it's concise and understandable to someone who literally has 3 minutes to review it. And then if you feel like you've nailed it, if you haven't nailed it, submit to seller performance. Also reach out to that account health team that you have that button that you can call them. They'll give you feedback and tell you what you missed. Sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong, but they might give good feedback. If you're still stuck and you feel like you've nailed it, go to jeff@amazon.com. We know that Jeff doesn't work there anymore. You're going to address that email to Dear Executive Seller Relations. That is the team to go to. Explain to them why you're frustrated. Keep it brief, and refer them back to that appeal and see if they can help you out.
That was a great nugget. Thank you, Lesley. All right, did we address all the Q&A that came in?
I think so.
Okay, cool. All right, let's drop back here real quick, a little bit out of order. Oh yes, slide 10. How to determine where to price your brand amongst the sea of fish in your category. And so, like, I'm never the type of person that tells you this is the way it is on Amazon. I always believe that the answer is a little bit more nuanced, especially around pricing. So one of the things I wanted to give away today, I thought would be super helpful, is that you have to let the data drive your decisions on Amazon. And this is what I did before I built Profasee. When I have 500 private label products, and we didn't know if we were suboptimally pricing, if we were overpriced, if we were underpriced. And so we would let the data drive our decision. So this is the actual spreadsheet that we had built to start managing and changing those prices and seeing how those prices have effects on the goal that we're trying to achieve. So are we trying to achieve profit optimization? Are we trying to liquidate? Are we trying to BSR optimize? And so I built a spreadsheet that you can duplicate. And so you'll see this QR code here. This is one that you can use to control your pricing. I found it super helpful, obviously, because I've turned around my business specifically, most of that through price changes and also having the right butts in the right seats. But I want to share that, and I want to drive this question back to Joe if he has anything to add.
You know, I think we kind of covered a lot of it earlier, where, you know, letting the data kind of speak is more important than using your fear. I think the fear factor of that, you know, when you're going into selling a product, is a problem, because if you're too worried about, you know, slowing down for a day, I think a lot of people look at their business too much on a day-to-day basis, where like they're so concerned, oh my God, my sales dipped, you know, by 10-15% today. What am I going to do? I mean, that's okay. It's all learning, right? So letting the data kind of speak, rolling it out, getting a real sample size, and then kind of adjusting as you go. I think that's the new way of doing things. And I think Chad spoke to it earlier, where the days of kind of leaving something at a fixed price for a year, I mean, that's not the way to make money on Amazon. You can sell product, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's a reason why Chad's software is called Profasee, not non-profit-see. I mean, you're trying to make profit. So we have to focus on that. There are too many expenses that are related to Amazon these days, too many fees, hidden fees. All the fees are going up. If you don't think of it that way, like that every year there's inflation in the world, there's also inflation in selling on Amazon, then you're just never going to make money. You're going to find yourself spinning your wheels. At the end of the year, there's not going to be anything left.
Yeah, and you just spoke about the PPC inflation that's been happening on the platform. It's massive, and it's hard to keep up.
Massive.
For sure.
Now I think even return processing fees have gone up. So that's another thing to keep in mind, where, you know, years past, it was very minimal. I think that went up. And I mean, we all know what type of returns everyone gets in January from the from the orders from December. So I've been looking at some of my profitability. I'm like, where is all my profit? I'm selling goods this month and I'm profitable, but all the returns are coming in, the return processing fees are coming in, and it just all adds up. So
Yep.
inching out that $1.50, $1.50 per unit on the front end is so important.
Awesome. Lesley, you want to bring us home on this final slide here? And then we'll go to the
Absolutely.
and then we'll go to the giveaways, by which these giveaways are special.
Yes,
tuned.
we definitely have to get to giveaways. Okay, so Amazon's gated me out of a brand I've been selling for years. I've reapplied and been denied multiple times. I'm stuck with inventory. What do I do now? So let me first tell everyone on the call why this applies to you. You think it doesn't? I promise it does. Amazon has a new thing they're doing with gating, and it's not cool. Sometimes they are gating folks out of a brand, even their own private label brand, people, because you had some ASIN suspensions and you either ignored them or you acknowledged them. So if you have an ASIN suspended, there's an option that you acknowledge. In other words, you're saying, I did it, I'm guilty, I did it. Well, if you do that, a lot of times you can't sell the item anymore. Or if you do, you can only do it by circumventing, which is breaking their rules. So for everyone on the call, as of now, if you get ASIN suspensions, you've got to appeal all of them and never just acknowledge, because you're putting yourself at risk of never selling that product again. So the gating that I'm seeing that fits this model, where you're denied and locked out and they won't talk to you, is people who've not appealed ASIN suspensions. And then the first thing I do as a consultant, I appeal those ASIN suspensions. We get them back up, right? But then you still are locked out of the brand. So in these cases, the frontline folks in that brand gating team do not feel like they have authority to solve your problem. So these are having to be escalated to various teams in Amazon. If you can find someone in catalog, if you know anyone in your category, if you know anyone who's in brands, and by brands, I mean, there are some VP director level people we escalate to frequently that they care about brand owners and brand assortment. Those are the only people at Amazon right now who care about solving this problem for sellers.
Awesome. Awesome. So here's what we're going to do next, is we have 8 minutes left of this specific webinar. I want to be mindful and conscious and respect everybody's time. We've got some good giveaways, and we have an opportunity for some questions. And if we don't get to your questions in the chat, we will get to them if you put your email address in. Okay. I promise that. So just make sure you're addressing who you want to ask the question to, and we'll get to it. So why don't we jump over to, do you mind if we jump to your, Joe, Lesley, your giveaway first, if that's cool?
Absolutely. So we want to offer all the folks on the webinar 50% off consult calls. So that's a 30-minute one-on-one call with one of us or one of our consultants. We make sure we assign those to the people who have the experience in your specific area that you have a problem. And a lot of them are ex-Amazon folks. So reach out and we'd love to give you that 50% off. Also, if you send an email to partners, P-A-R-T-N-E-R-S at riverbendconsulting.com, and I'll put it in the chat, the first 5 people will get a free copy of my new book. It dropped yesterday. It's called The Amazon Incubator. It is a guide for selling on Amazon. And it talks a whole lot about setting up SOPs, how to work with VAs, all kinds of great ideas on how you can set up your business to be more automatic and make more money. So if you send that email, and I'll put the email address in the chat, the first 5 folks to send an email to that email address, they are going to get a free copy of the book shipped to them.
Amazing, amazing. All right, I'm gonna drop my giveaway here, and that is the first time we've ever done this. It's 1 month free of hyper learning. So I had shared here, right, that we price experiment and we learn and we explore pricing within your specific boundaries that you give us as a private label brand. And we train a model around every specific ASIN that you have. So every ASIN gets their own model. We train it, we feed it with all these different signals so we can actually go to market with you and make you a whole lot more money. And so this giveaway is the first time we've done this. You scan this QR code and you get a free month of hyper learning where we train a model around your business and give you other pricing insights. If you talk to our salesperson, just use the code CREAM. Cash rules everything around me. If anybody gets that rap reference, use the code CREAM, and we'll make sure that we denote it in your account. And with the last 5 minutes, we do want to open up to Q&A. So make sure that you're addressing the individual here on the call along with your email address if you can. That would be helpful, because if we don't get to it, we can get back to you. And if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Did I miss anything, Joe, Lesley?
I don't think so. This has been great. I love the questions we got today. Thanks everyone
Yes.
for being interactive. It makes it so much more fun.
I think also you have a
Yes.
pretty sophisticated group of sellers here. So the questions were very specific. Few people even built some context around what they're dealing with, and I hope we were able to give them some sound advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It also helps to have great partners in Riverbend. You guys are awesome. I love collaborating with you. Until next time.
Thank you. See
Thanks
you
so
guys.
much.